Scuba diving has been a passion of mine since I've taken my first breath underwater, and although it's been around since Jacques Cousteau created the first commercially available aqualung in 1943, many advancements have been made. Today, I will show you a modern scuba setup and its components. I've been diving for about a year now, and it's helped me realize through experience the importance of each one of these components. The first thing is you want to make sure that you have the four main components. Your buoyancy control system, or BC as it's commonly called. The air tank, which will be feeding you the air throughout the dive. This is usually a blend of 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, and 1% trace gases. The regulator, which has more components that will go into depth later, and your dive computer, which logs your dive time and your depth. Each one of these has its own specific role, and if one is out of sync with the other, it can mean trouble for the diver. The BC is there to strap onto your body. It uses the air from the tank to inflate and deflate so that you can achieve buoyancy at any depth. It also serves as a vest in which you can keep tools, such as a dive knife, also your pressure gauge, and weights. The air tank is, pretty important since we can't breathe underwater. Therefore, it's commonly called the first stage. The regulator is the next most important piece. It has four parts: a second stage, or your main regulator, an octo, which is your backup regulator, a low pressure inflation hose that feeds air to your BC, and finally a pressure gauge to measure how much air you have left in your tank. Lastly, you have a dive computer that's usually a technical wristwatch. This logs your dive times and helps you keep track of how deep you are. More importantly, it gives you a gauge of the nitrogen in your body and also the levels. This is paramount because if you ascend too fast or have too much nitrogen in your bloodstream, you could have a physical condition called the bends. Now that we know the components and what they do, let's move on to how to connect them. There's a normal procedure that any certified diver is taught. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to slide the BC down onto the tank using the clamps that are around back. Tighten it onto the tank and clip any necessary parts so it doesn't move while you're entering or exiting the water. Make sure that it's tight. Next, you're going to connect the regulator setup. And this is how it's done. You also want to make sure that it's tight so that there are no leaks. Now, connect your low pressure hose into your BC. And you're going to want to put on your dive computer and check the settings. Essentially, now that we've put together the setup, let's take a look at why each part of your regulator setup is so important. Your main regulator, or second stage, is what you will be breathing with, meaning that for the duration of the dive, you'll rely on this. Your octo is there in case of an emergency. If your main regulator fails or another diver you're with has a system failure, you can pass this to them and you can breathe off a single tank. The pressure gauge is there by your side. It basically helps you make an appropriate safety decision on when you can ascend. And lastly, the low pressure hose fills your BC so that you can regulate an accurate buoyancy or float to the surface of the water in case of an emergency. Now that we understand what each component does and why it's so important, let's review the setup procedure. 1, make sure you have your four main components. 2, follow the normal procedure that was explained before. 3, double check everything and make sure that it's connected the right way and in the right place. And 4, make sure your dive computer is working. Now you're ready to hop in the water. The 2 main rules my instructor taught me were to essentially have fun and to be safe. I hope this demonstration showed you what goes into a scuba setup and you're encouraged to go try it yourself.